Welcome, dear friends. Today's video is made in tribute to the late Dolores Cannon, a world-renowned past life regressionist, passionate researcher of lost knowledge, captivating speaker, and author of 19 fascinating books on the topic of extraterrestrial phenomenon and soul's evolutionary journey through cosmos. She passed away on the 19th of October, 2014, and on this day in particular, she's tenderly remembered by thousands of people around the world. I could go into many details of her life's legacy, but the main focus of my video today will be a review of her birth chart and her death chart from the Galactic Astrology perspective. I want to show you her fixed stars alignments in both charts, as there are peculiar connections there that I want to point out today. With that, my main intention is to kind of pique the curiosity of our growing community of galactic astrology enthusiasts, and to then invite you to continue exploring both birth and death charts of prominent people. I hope that our combined research can validate my theory that I'll present in this video and potentially uncover new levels of information related to our soul's journey through cosmos. Before we look at the life and death charts of Dolores Cannon, to better understand their meaning for those who are not too familiar with her work, I want to highlight some of the key elements of her incredible legacy. Dolores Cannon was born on April 15th, 1931. She married her husband Johnny in 1951, a career U.S. naval man with whom she spent the next 21 years traveling all over the world to accommodate his various overseas assignments while raising her many children. In 1960s, Dolores started assisting her husband, who was using simple hypnosis for habits, helping people to stop smoking, lose weight, and so on. In 1968, one of their clients spontaneously regressed to a past life, and this introduced Dolores and her husband to the idea of reincarnation. This blessed incident, as well as other peculiar events, ultimately changed the course of her life forever. Fast forward, her legacy now includes 19 phenomenal books where she shared her unprecedented research and recovering of lost knowledge, as well as information on extraterrestrial life. Her books were translated into over 20 languages. Dolores has received the Orpheus Award in Bulgaria for the highest advancement in the research of psychic phenomena. She toured the world and gave thousands of lectures on various topics related to reincarnation and UFO phenomenon in various life group events, conferences, radio shows, TV shows, magazine articles. The list goes on. In addition, she had her own weekly radio show called The Metaphysical Hour on BBS Radio for 9 years. You can find more about her extraordinary life story on DoloresCannon.com website, and you may be delighted to know that you can watch her countless videos with her lectures on various topics on her YouTube channel. Her daughter Julia Cannon and many others are keeping her legacy alive and thriving. Now, let us look at her birth and death chart report that includes some of the most well-known fixed stars. If you haven't seen a report like this before, you can visit my website, galacticastrochart.com, enter your own birth details, and see which stars or major cosmic points may be supporting your life in this incarnation. The galacticastrochart.com calculations are based on Western astrology and Placidus house system. But if we have any Vedic astrologers watching this video, we are considering the precession of stars based on each year. Our system automatically recalculates this. So whether you're looking at Vedic or Western astrology, the fixed stars that you get in our galacticastrochart.com will remain the same. With regards to the birth and death details of Dolores Cannon, her time of birth is listed on astro.com databank with capital A mark, which means it is a reliable source coming from her immediate family records. So we can be quite certain that her time of birth was recorded as 2 p.m. on the 15th of April, 1931. Her death time is estimated based on Julia Cannon's article released on the day of Dolores' passing, saying that she left us in the very early hours of the morning. I then dowsed on the precise time and I got 5:57 a.m. If you are an experienced dowser or if you use muscle testing to verify information, you're welcome to check on this and use your own discernment here. One more point I want to make here is that from the astrological delineation perspective, I could go on for hours talking about her chart, as so much can be said about how the planets' alignments influence her life quite significantly. But here, for the purpose of this video, I really want to focus on the fixed stars alignments and share what stands out for me as relevant today. If any of you galactic astrology enthusiasts will experience another relevant information jumping at you while reviewing this, please feel free to share your perspective in the comments to enrich us all. Now, let's take a look at Dolores's galactic astrology charts standing side by side. On the left, you see her birth chart. On the right, you see her chart of her passing. On many occasions, as I reflected on soul's evolutionary journey and how it can be tracked by astrology, I always presumed that when a person incarnates into this life experience and their soul had deep connection to a star system, that star system will have to be in geometrical, mathematical, precise alignment with some of the planets in the chart. I also often pondered that at the time of our passing, if a soul came here on a mission from a different star system, let's say Pleiades, when they complete their mission, fulfill their mission on Earth, and they wish to return as a soul, as individual consciousness, that at the time of their passing, the Pleiades or whichever star system they are connected to will also have to be in precise alignment to some of the planets. And here with Dolores's two charts, I can see this to be the case. So the first thing I want to point out to you is that at the time of her birth, we see that Sun in Aries at 24:52 degrees was opposing Arcturus, the star system in the Buddhist constellation. And peculiarly, at the time of her passing, her Sun was conjuncting Arcturus at 1:32. And also her Venus was conjunct Arcturus at 0.02. So very tight alignment, and her Venus was in her first house, as was her Sun. So my belief is intuitively that Dolores was here on a mission, and she completed that mission with flying colors. Like, if any of you follow Dolores's work, I always imagine for someone like Dolores who raised frequency of thousands, if not millions of people, raised the vibration, expanded heart, expanded their level of consciousness. When I see her passing, I see legions of souls celebrating her life in deep gratitude for her contribution towards development of collective consciousness. I see her celebrated on both sides. And from what I remember, when Dolores was talking about her own past lives, she incarnated on Earth on several occasions. One of the first past lives that she remembered was her being a scribe in Alexandria and her living through the moment when the ancient greatest library of Alexandria was destroyed in fire. And she was carrying numerous scrolls in her arms, running away from fire, doing her best to frantically trying to preserve as many scrolls as she could possibly carry and bring them to safety. So with that in mind, knowing that she lived on Earth for many lives, Arcturus being in opposition to her Sun, as well as several other star systems being in opposition, it would imply that She may have come here from Arcturus very long time ago. She had several past lives, human past lives experiences here on Earth. So when she was born into this life, in her early years, she was more human than a starseed in her consciousness. The frequency of the Arcturian soul wisdom was not fully integrated in her physical body consciousness. It became activated and integrated much later in her life. And towards the end of her life, you could witness how she embodied higher consciousness that is connected to Arcturus. This beautiful, grounded, compassionate wisdom that she shared with us so eloquently and so gracefully. I recall even before seeing Arcturus being aligned to Dolores' chart, I intuitively always presumed that she had Arcturian frequencies with her, whether as Arcturian guides or her soul origin somehow being linked, or her past being linked to the Arcturus. I always felt that. I'm very familiar with that frequency because I've met many souls that have very strong Arcturian connection and also many alignments in their charts. And you will recognize these souls by their natural ability to feel compassion for other people's suffering. They're able to put themselves in other people's shoes easier than those who don't necessarily have these alignments. They are caring, they're very diplomatic in their relationships. They always try to keep balance and harmony in all their relationships. And it is very difficult for them to deal with people who are manipulative because it's not in their nature to be like that. Most souls whom I've met who had Arcturian alignments in their earlier years, their circumstances called them to be of service to others, whether as mothers, nurses, teachers, selflessly giving their time and energy to helping others, supporting others in whatever way was needed. And Dolores herself had that path as a caring mother of 4 or 5 children, I believe, and her husband survived an accident that made him bound to a wheelchair, and she was taking care of him for many years until the end of his life before she started her career as hypnotherapist. So she too had her fair share of compassionate service. I made 10-15 minutes long video, beautifully illustrated, on Arcturian starseeds. I've mentioned Dolores there. I will link it here below. So I'll leave that topic and move on to other fixed stars. These 2 charts are only showing conjunct and opposite alignments to various fixed stars. You can see that her charts are quite busy. This would be a chart of highly advanced soul. And if I added trines, 6,000 squares, it would be super overwhelming for a viewer, for someone who has no clue about any of this. But if you go to my website and enter these details, you can add the option of trine 6,000 squares, and they'll give you additional information about additional star systems that Dolores was connected one way or another, whether as part of her mission in supporting star seeds from those star systems or meeting them at some point in her ancient soul history. So, you can go very deep into soul history when you start looking at these connections. In traditional astrology, astrologers, when they look at the chart, they start interpreting the potential influence of the planets on person's lives, starting looking at the sun, the moon, ascendant, working their way down all the way to Pluto, and then looking at all kinds of other aspects. Every technique is different, every astrologer is different, but traditionally you start from sun and work your way down towards the outer planets. With galactic astrology, the way I was intuitively guided, once I started looking at charts that look like this, I start from Pluto and work my way up towards the sun. Because I found, over seeing hundreds upon hundreds of charts, I find that the outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, are showing us our soul connection to the most ancient soul history. In our records, the star systems that are connected to Pluto, Neptune, Uranus feel very distant, like aeons ago, our soul's beginnings in lower density experiences, and often non-physical experiences linked to these different star systems. So here, when I look at Dolores's chart, I found so much validation in seeing Pluto connected to Lyra nebula. I really felt that frequency from Dolores even before knowing that to be so in her astrology. Anyone who I've met who had Pluto, and often Neptune, Uranus, but really Pluto connected to Lyra, I know them to be the most ancient souls connected to the founder race, living in ancient Lyra aeons ago when humanity was seated in that constellation, and there are many different stars within Lyra constellation. But it's the Lyra ring nebula, and for Dolores, very tight alignment at only 19 minutes. That's very, very tight. So ring nebula in Lyra is considered to be intergalactic portal. Oftentimes, looking at soul records, souls who have this connection in their chart, they actually came to our galaxy through Lyra nebula ring, and they came from other galaxies, and oftentimes even from other universes. So here for Dolores, this cannot be proven or disproven. So take everything with a pinch of salt here and just feel into what I'm saying. Does it resonate or it doesn't resonate? Take what feels right and leave what doesn't. I'm just going with what wants to come through. So I would hypothesize that Dolores came to our galaxy from another galaxy as a very highly advanced soul. It feels ethereal-like, and it feels like she came with a group of beings into our galaxy, very, very high frequency, and started exploring this Milky Way galaxy in the proximity of Lyra nebula. So perhaps the star system that we know as Sheliak, there may have been a planet where they would have settled, they would have explored for a while, and at that point, humanity in the lower densities, like third, fourth, fifth experiment would have started, seeding would have started, and she would have had memories in her soul records linked to ancient Lyran humans. Lyran human race, as we know from so many different channelers, would have spread across hundreds of different star systems, made it all the way to Earth as well. That DNA is very much present on Earth. Now, moving forward in a linear sense, which is so challenging when we are looking at highly advanced souls, because they really live beyond time and space reality. They go back and forth from lower density to higher density. It's really challenging, but here looking at her astrology and based on what galactic connections influence her life experience here on Earth, when I'm seeing Neptune, the planet of higher wisdom, higher consciousness, divine guidance, close to her ascendant in her first house in Virgo, opposing FOMALHAUT. FOMALHAUT is another significant fixed star that I often see with people who have access to higher consciousness, who are guided to talk about ancient history, universal laws, and in one way or another, inspiring humanity towards evolution of their consciousness. So here, I feel that the very high frequency of her soul essence coming from this other galaxy as higher dimensional being, FOMALHAUT star system would have been really good match. Anyone who I've met who has FOMALHAUT alignments in their chart, they feel very angelic, but they also feel a deep, profound connection to Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness or whatever their tradition or beliefs is religiously. If we drop all the labels, that consciousness feels like golden light, beautiful divine light that is guiding us towards unity rather than judgment and separation, towards love, towards healing, peace, compassion, and just this beautiful grounded wisdom. And she certainly was embodying that, right? And interestingly, anyone who I've met who had FOMALHAUT alignments in combination with Lyra, SIRIUS, ARCTURUS, as we see in her chart, they would have had throughout their life experience stories of Jesus coming up. And I find it so interesting that Dolores attracted clients who regressed to past lives of Jesus. She wrote 2 books on the topic as she documented these incredible past life regressions. If you haven't read it, well worth the read. Truly fascinating. One of them is called Jesus and These Scenes, and the other book is called They Walked with Jesus. Beautiful, beautiful books. Okay, next, if I move up, then Uranus conjuncting Tau Ceti in Cetus constellation. Again, very tightly, less than 1 degree, 58 minutes. That's a very tight alignment, and it's conjunct Tau Ceti. I would presume here that Dolores, as a ethereal soul, higher dimensional soul, decided to connect with Tau Ceti human collectives and start exploring this Milky Way galaxy as a researcher. And I would see that connection as her beginning of learning about this Milky Way galaxy in a more physical sense and learning about all kinds of topics related to physiology, biology, consciousness in human form, in lower densities. From various channel text on Tau Ceti, we know that there is a big factions of humans from Tau Ceti who are members of Galactic Federation of Worlds and who are very actively involved in supporting humanity's evolution on Earth, and in particular connected to extraterrestrial topics of abduction, of UFO phenomenon. And oftentimes I would see Tau Ceti connections with people who are either born into military families, that especially with US Navy or Royal Air Force bases worldwide. Whenever there is connection to extraterrestrial topics, Tau Ceti is in the chart. I find it so interesting that she married a naval man, originally based in Arizona, and she has this connection. I find it quite fascinating. I believe it could be Lisa Royal Holt who channeled that Tau Ceti human collective actually helped to stop human abduction on Earth in early 2000, as well as cattle abduction in around 2000. They were very adamant at making sure that it will not continue. According to this source, their own nation in Tau Ceti planets was suffering from these involuntary abductions, and they managed to stop it. And then they continued on their quest against the reptilian and greys that were, and other races that were involved with these involuntary abductions. So we thank Tau Ceti for their service to humanity. And humans, as I said, who have Tau Ceti in their chart, they often feel called to talk about extraterrestrial topics. Okay, if we move further up, another major connection to Procyon, which also is another star system in Canis Minor. Her Saturn in Capricorn is connected to this star system. And yet again, Procyon humans are, just like Tau Ceti, also heavily involved in liberating humanity from deception and manipulation that we have been exposed to for thousands of years. So I presume, based on this and intuitively, that as her soul descended into lower densities, kind of incarnated into physical human bodies, she would have had incarnations as Tau Ceti, and she would have had potentially incarnations as a Procyon human, and then potentially as a Sirian being. And these star systems, nations, they are cooperating. They're very much working together. It feels like cousins working on similar projects. So I find it beautiful seeing all these three in her chart so closely, such tight alignments. All these star systems, their humans have Lyran DNA. So it's like you're incarnating in various star systems that are carrying the same DNA. So it is easy for soul to incarnate in these various star systems because they have very similar living conditions and human body DNA that can integrate the soul incarnation from star system to star system easily. Going back to Tau Ceti, I presume intuitively that she would have reached leadership position in any of the research projects she was involved with. Her ancient soul wisdom, her soul essence would have come through here, and she would naturally reach a higher position as a leader, as a pioneer, as initiator, helping her teams reach their goals. And that frequency of the natural leadership as a researcher, because it's conjuncting her natal planet, it is something that was well integrated in her personality from the beginning of her incarnation on Earth at this time. When you have opposite alignments, fixed stars like FOMALHAUT, Neptune, that Christed consciousness of her Neptune was not necessarily integrated in her human experience in her early years. It was always there at the back of her mind. It would have felt perhaps as a parallel consciousness where, yes, she is kind of observing herself from that higher state of incredibly wise intelligence of her greater being, but her human self didn't necessarily always access that consciously. In later years, yes. Okay, so that's the difference between opposite and conjunct alignments to fixed stars. The conjunct ones are much more present in our personality from the get-go. The opposite alignments integrate later in our life. So next, with the Procyon opposite, I presume then that kind of natural ability of leadership that comes through Capricorn was integrated and embodied later in her life. And certainly with Saturn in Capricorn, it demands of the human to be diligent, determined, and persevere with their goals, with their career, and the fruits of the labor come later in life. The person has to withstand the test of time and not give up during difficult times. And we certainly see that being a theme in Dolores's life. It took a very long time, many, many years, for her books to be published. She was rejected by so many publishers until she decided to start her own book publishing company. And that's how she managed to publish her books, so that's Saturn in Capricorn theme, very much so. And in fifth house, perhaps the fact as well that she had many children and her first priority was to take care of her children. It allowed for her natural wisdom to develop through human life experience, and then later her career took off, literally in the second half of her life. Okay, so as we move up towards Jupiter, conjuncting Sirius A, very tightly at 0.17. So this is something that would be well integrated. And anyone that I see who has Sirius A alignments, they are carrying this grounded wisdom. If I compare to someone who has Pleiadian stars conjunctions, they're very fast-paced and very impatient, and they want to do 100 things at the same time. They're multitaskers, and they even speak much faster, and they like to listen to people at a fast pace. They would always put YouTube videos on 2.0 speed. Pleiadians are super fast. In contrast, someone who has conjunct Sirius in their chart, they are speaking at a much slower pace. They don't mind taking their time, explaining any concept, and they feel very grounded, like nothing can faze them. They feel almost like Taurus people, very grounded and strong and stable. It feels like their roots are going deep and wide into the earth. So she had that about herself, right? When you observe Dolores's talks and conversations, and when she was asked all kinds of questions you can think of, she was always very grounded and stable and able to deal with anything and everything in a very mature, grounded wisdom way. So here, Jupiter, Cancer, 11th house. This is a frequency of the galactic aspects from Sirius A, and perhaps opposition of Vega. It could be one or the other. I would need to dowse and actually look at her soul records. Could be one or the other or both. These were the frequencies that were assisting her with her work with the collective. I can presume that she would have had spirit guides coming from Sirius or from Vega, and that these guides would work with her when she was working with the collective, certainly in a group setting and assisting with physical body healing. I believe it was Lisa Royal Holt who channeled in her book called The Prism of Lyra. She would have said that Syrian collective frequency that is working with humanity at this time is excellent for physical body healing physical body traumas, and transforming the physical DNA towards higher frequency. And Arcturian frequencies are excellent for emotional body healing. And here in Dolores' chart, we can see both Syrian and Arcturian frequencies working together. And then FOMALHAUT, I would go as far as say, excellent for spiritual body frequencies work. So it's quite amazing to see this in her chart. And perhaps this alignment helped her natural ability to understand various metaphysical topics, because VEGA human collectives assisted humanity through teaching us various spiritual practices, from yoga to meditation, sound healing, crystal healing, you name it. The origins are in VEGA and then through Sirius. So she has this beautiful Stargate within her chart between her 11th and 5th house. So working with the collective, the 11th house, supporting the higher ideals of the collective, and the 5th house, house of her creations, her books, and so on. So excellent combination, assisting her soul mission on Earth. Mars and Venus here are not showing any conjunct and opposite alignments based on the 63, I believe, fixed stars that we now have in our system. But when I checked outside of our calculator, her Venus in Pisces is actually conjunct to a star called FOMALHAUT in Pisces constellation. And this star, according to the late astrologer and vizier Dane Rudhyar, is connected to people who become or have a potential to become masters in structuring pupils. So master teacher. And wasn't Dolores a master teacher? Person who has this star conjunct in their chart has great potential, wonderful ability to transfer of their knowledge to their pupils, to their students, in a way that will be fruitful, as in the legacy will live on. This star is often linked to FOMALHAUT as well, and according to Dane Rudhyar, they both these stars have the connotation of great power and wisdom bestowed from above for the benefit of humanity, releasing us from the inertia of the past and opening us up to the new era. And wasn't that part of Dolores' mission? I find it fascinating to find lesser known fixed stars in people's charts and see how they in fact do show up in our lives in a very particular way, just as described by some of these super attuned astrologers, astronomers, philosophers who were very in tune with the cosmos and the archetypal consciousness of humanity. Moving up to her Mercury conjuncting Andromedan star system called Alma at only 40 minutes. So again, less than a degree. I would see this as well integrated frequency of the Andromedans, who are master liberators. Anything limiting must be dissolved, and true sense of freedom must be established. So for her mind, Mercury, the way she communicates, the way she learns, Mercury in 9th house, focusing on higher wisdom and teachings. I would see this as a very positive connection to Andromeda that was very beneficial for her mind. And certainly her books helped break limiting beliefs. I'm aware of so many people who had no idea about these metaphysical topics. And somehow when they saw Dolores and heard Dolores speaking, she was able to get through to them and really break the chains of their dogmatic previous beliefs anchored in the old society, whether religion or politics and whatnot. That Andromedan liberating freedom-seeking frequency is coming through very beautifully. And here we can then also look at her south node and north node. These are lunar nodes showing us evolutionary path of the soul across many different lifetimes. And for that to be connected to Andromeda, also, but different star system, ARCTURUS in this case, also quite tightly. Again, her path is path of liberation, whether in personal relationships, whether in anything of value. The Andromedan frequency was making sure that she will not be limited by anything in her mind, in her consciousness, in her spirit, in her heart. She would have been always guided to look through the eyes of the higher spirit, that part that is eternal. And wasn't she the biggest advocate of the fact that this is all just a game and that we live on and that we don't have to take all this too seriously? If any of you heard her talking, she would have been saying this quite regularly. So I find it so wonderful to see Andromeda connected to her soul's journey. Now, her midheaven, MC, which is a point in our chart that talks about our service to humanity, our career, our vocation. Hers is in Taurus, 25 degrees, is opposing Beta Centauri, known also as HADAR. It's aligned at 2.08 degrees, so not as tight as all the other stars that we were looking at. But from my experience, anyone with connection to this star system, part of their mission is to anchor frequency of unconditional love on Earth and embody consciousness that feels idealistic, that feels like if everyone lived this way, we would live in utopian civilization where everything is wonderful. And, reviewing some of her talks and what she was teaching, and the essence of her teaching was about forgiveness, not holding grudges, seeing everything from higher perspective, pushing us to reflect and learn from everything we are experiencing, seeing everything as lessons and always striving to do better and better in every way. So if all lived with that in mind, this would be a much, much better place. And also her wonderful ability to hold compassionate space for her clients from all walks of life, standing there or sitting there for them in a completely non-judgmental way. I mean, this is how she was able to become a very busy and well-known hypnotherapist way back in the day. I believe she started in a very small town where you could think that it would be hard to get enough clients. But because she was so willing to see anyone with any kinds of issues, and everyone felt so safe opening up to her, and as a result of that, healing from all their grudges and secrets, this is perhaps why that the beautiful frequency of HADAR, which from the channel text is utopian civilization, it feels like safe haven, that is untouched by manipulated souls. Perhaps this is why she had this beautiful charisma, and that's why she was loved by so many people, that beautiful frequency was coming through. Of course, in combination with the Arcturians, SIRIUS, FOMALHAUT frequency, it looks like she's such awesome connections. Okay, moving up, her ascendant conjuncting Regulus, another royal star. So the four royal stars are FOMALHAUT, Regulus, Antares, and Aldebaran. So having Regulus conjunct at 50 minutes, less than a degree, to her ascendant. Ascendant tells us about the frequency we emanate from our being at first encounter, the face we show to the world, and how we are perceived to the world on first impression. Regulus is such a mighty frequency of royalty, but to me, in a best way possible here with Dolores. She really deserves her crown, and she can wear it so gracefully. There is no ego attached really to her royalty of her soul that has contributed so much to this planet's evolution of consciousness. And she's always embodied divine leadership in a very humble way. right? No matter how famous she got, no matter how many places she's seen and visited, she was always humble and grounded and committed to continuing delivering immense value to humanity. So with that in mind, I wouldn't be surprised if she had more than a handful of lives on Earth or other places where she lived higher social status, where she was either born to a family with high status or she achieved higher status as a result of her own doing. You know, I often see Regulus in charts of people who, through past life regression, revisited lifetimes of royalty or high social status. Now, her moon opposing super galactic center at only 27 minutes, a quarter of a degree. We have recently added these major cosmic points to our free calculator. So you might see them in your own chart. Moon opposing this point. So this is in the 8th house. So then supergalactic center would be sitting in her 2nd house, house of value, and also her south node where she was coming from. There is this great magnetic force pulling her moon energy towards itself. Conjunction of supergalactic center in her chart would be in 2nd house in Libra. So even though her moon was in Aries, early degrees of Aries, with her south node in Libra and her moon kind of being forced towards degrees of Libra, she would have always been very conscious of other people's emotional bodies, emotional states, and able to navigate that. I'm presuming here that if Dolores's mother was embodying the Aries frequency, because oftentimes the moon represents also our mother, what did we inherit or experience with our earthly mother, and sun in our charts would often show us what was the father like. So I presume that both her parents were quite dominant in their characters. Perhaps the pressure was on to behave and respect the parent and honor the parent. Although the degrees of Aries here, very early Aries, it's very pure Aries energy. It's not this egocentric, infantile, demanding Aries. It's not like that. That very early, that 0 degree of Aries is very pure. And then the higher degrees of Aries, indeed connected to Sagittarius. So higher degrees of Aries, again, it's the more evolved Aries. So it might have been as bad, although if I remember correctly, I believe Dolores experienced parents that had very difficult relationship between themselves. So it's likely that they were both quite opinionated and strong. But because of the supergalactic center here opposing, kind of pulling her towards what she valued, what she found important on a soul level, that perhaps helped her to not be like that, to not express the stubborn Aryan energy that is more like Mars and explosive. I believe that because of this alignment here, she wasn't like that. And she, perhaps because she saw her parents fighting, she decided she would never be like that. And then there are other alignments in terms of her ascendant and descendant. Her descendant has Pisces in it, so I believe she was attracted to her husband's soul and psyche because he may have been quite original in his thinking. There is like Aquarius and Pisces degree on her descendant, and quite sensitive and in tune in his nature. So I think they kind of found each other as a result of that. I would love to hear from Julia Cannon or anyone who knows if Julia ever talked about her father and the relationship between Dolores and her husband, and then Julia's grandparents, Dolores's parents. You know, I'm just presuming here based on what I see. So this alignment with her moon, I would say, has gifted her immense emotional intelligence and attractive charisma that helped the viewers or listeners of her lectures be attracted to what she valued in her life. You know, whatever she presented as important, it had this immense magnetic force of supergalactic center. Interesting, isn't it? And now we are moving to her sun alignments, Arcturus opposing, and Spica and Virgo constellation opposing. Here I find that Arcturus is the more prominent alignment here rather than Spica star system. And having this alignment in her ninth house, I feel like it's the Arcturian frequency that is connected to her sun was kind of the signature that was coming through her higher self that so many people picked up on. I felt that Arcturian frequency here so strongly with Dolores. I was so happy to see it in her chart. So I went through talking about her fixed stars alignments in her birth chart. What I found really fascinating was to see how much her death chart was mirroring her birth chart in the opposing way. It really looks like a gateway straight to her galactic origins. It really feels like she completed her mission on Earth and has reunited with her higher dimensional galactic aspects and is supporting us from those higher dimensions, higher planes, rather than soul of someone whose death chart wouldn't be matching as this, who would stay around in the earthly planes waiting for very quick reincarnation in the physical body again. First time I started thinking about that chart was in recent passing of one of my acquaintance from childhood. I was able to look at his death chart as I had the time of his passing, and I couldn't find any of the fixed stars alignments there. And my strong sense was that he was going to reincarnate very soon because there was this sense of a lot of unfinished business. He made many poor choices, kind of unevolved consciousness choices, and as if it really felt like he's going to come right back. And his birth chart, death chart was showing that too. I couldn't find any connection to higher consciousness, fixed stars there. And then Dolores' chart was the second death chart that I looked at, and I saw this, and I was like, whoa, this is incredible. So let's look at her passing chart. Again, coming from Pluto upwards, Pluto was conjuncting star in Lyra, Alatvar. If we compare to her natal Pluto was opposing stars in Lyra. Her Neptune was conjuncting FOMALHAUT, royal fixed star. Her natal Neptune was opposing FOMALHAUT. So as if, coming back after many years, many lifetimes of mission on Earth, now returning to that original state, kind of integrating that higher galactic connection or higher dimensional connection, reunited in spirit. Uranus was conjuncting Andromeda, fixed star Alpheratz, which we saw being in alignment with her evolutionary soul journey. Saturn was conjuncting Beta Centauri Hadar. Here we have that star in alignment with her midheaven, her mission on Earth. Mars was conjuncting Galactic Center. Perhaps that acted as a gateway, as a portal towards higher frequencies, and Orion Nebula as well. Again, if I see Orion Nebula in anyone's chart, these people feel like angelic beings, very humble, beautiful, compassionate souls that are just so pure souls usually have Orion Nebula alignments in their chart, from my experience. Venus was conjuncting Arcturus, and so was her sun. I really feel like she reunited with her Arcturian aspects, Arcturian family, Arcturian guides. I feel that Arcturian frequency was so active throughout her mission and support of the human collective. South North node of her passing aligning to Tau Ceti. I think it's so interesting to see that her lunar nodes are opposing each other. And I was wondering this myself. So here, let me explain her. In her natal chart, South node in Libra and her North node in Aries. So that would imply that many of her previous lifetime and certainly her early life, her identity was very much connected to her relationship to others. Oftentimes, mothers who identify as mothers of many children, they would have South node in Libra. But they've done it in so many incarnations where their identity is kind of based on who they are to everyone else, how they serve everyone else. They are called to polarize that towards Aries and find their identity in their own being based on what they value, what they are passionate about, and follow that inner calling of the Aries. Okay, so Dolores did reach that. At first, she was a mother and a wife, but eventually she became known as an individual, as her own unique being that is worldwide known now. So she fulfilled that North Node in Aries assignment. Now, with her death chart, her North Node there was in Libra and South Node in Aries. So kind of talking of lifetime lived as Aries and heading towards, again, working as one of many, being in a collective. You know, it doesn't matter anymore if I am an individual, I work together with everyone else. We're all equal. When I reviewed many of my own past lives, I have the axis of Gemini, Sagittarius. I recall lifetimes where I was more Gemini, and I recall lifetimes where I was more Sagittarius. And I feel that these two, the lunar nodes, are flipping from lifetime to lifetime. It could be that you have several lives with same sign, South Node, but at some point they're flipping, you know, especially if you live many lifetimes, it's likely that you're going back and forth between the two until you master that archetypal frequency. So I find it interesting to see that in her death chart, that the lunar nodes are flipping. Let me know what you think. And just mentioning here also, her moon is opposing FOMALHAUT, although Neptune was conjuncting. So it's as if, you know, Neptune and moon are kind of forming the gateway towards her soul's ability to integrate and reconnect with the frequency of the beautiful FOMALHAUT star, and perhaps her past soul history with that star system, as well as ARCTURUS and all the others that we've mentioned. So I hope you found this intriguing and that it will set you on a path of exploring birth and death charts of prominent people. And I will look forward to reading your comments. I hope you will be willing to share some of your discoveries in the comment section here, and that collectively we can take this to the next level and learn something new about soul's journey through cosmos. I hope I'm onto something here, and I can't wait to hear your feedback and connect with you through our future collaborations. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your encouraging words. It is thanks to those that I keep going and keep sharing. I send you all my love, so much joy. May you be well, be blessed, take care.